This is it. This is the big one. The End of the Death, Part 3, full spoiler summary. Of course, this video is going to contain huge spoilers for the entire Siege of Terra series, specifically for the last book. So if you couldn't read it, and if you don't want to be spoiled, please leave now. This is your only spoiler warning. A huge shout out to Woodstovia over on Reddit for helping with this write-up. Without him, this wouldn't be possible because I got the audio and he wrote it all down from the book. So please go and check out him in the description of this video. Let's jump in and let's get waffling. So the book begins with Guilliman's fleet, who's trying to make his way to Terra, but he can't because all the Chaos Sorcerer, all the warp stuff that is happening, it's literally engulfed Terra and the surrounding areas. Time stopped, it's just full chaos, so he can't find Terra to reinforce his father and his brothers. We then go to a chapter which is all about Perturabo. Perturabo's fleet is sailing away from Terra, but hasn't made its final retreat yet. Perturabo considers himself a practical follower of common sense, and every bit of sense tells him to return to Terra and kneel at Horus's feet so he can beg for forgiveness. But the rage inside him won't allow that. He screams and smashes parts of his ship with Forgebreaker. He decides eventually he will just have to fight Horus. He will have to retreat and prepare to kill Horus and the 16th Legion and every other person who will cheer the name Lupercal, even after Alfarius, Kurz and Fulgrim have slunk back to Terra to swear their loyalty to Horus himself. Now, something that we do see with Perturabo is that he actually doesn't like the symbolism or, of course, the warp magic, but he actually understands it. He's seen the data, he's done the calculations, and he has the ability to forge himself into this perfect weapon, into a weapon strong enough to kill Horus and everyone else who opposes him, but he just doesn't know if he could bring himself to kill Horus. So he sits in the chair that he's destroyed during his tantrums and watches the data pouring out of Terra. Then we jump to Lorgar. Now, Lorgar has retreated to a backwater world 14 months away from Terra that is educating the local population in the ways of chaos worship. Erebus then informs him of the ongoings on Terra. The word bearers have all seen visions of an angel dying and a corpse nailed to a bloody fifth throne, too weak to rule. Lorgar has tried to unseat Horus once before, and he believes that a crippled Horus nailed to a throne will be easy to take down, so he prepares to gut the local population and burn the world with fire before leaving. Back on Terra, a shockwave is sent out that makes the demons wince and hits every blood angel like a mass reactive shell. They begin to collapse and scream as each see a different vision of Sanguinius. Ralderon sees claws wrapped around him and he feels them piercing his flesh. Furio sees Sanguinius' body twisted apart by the four gods who begin to eat him, and he can feel their teeth. The angels explode across Terra. Nasir Amit sees himself surrounded by laughing demons, not Imperial Fist and White Scars, as he cleaves them in two. Malax Hest sees a maul raining down upon him, blow after blow, not an Imperial Fist throat who he tears out. Fafnir Ran is standing on a mound of traitor corpses. He is suddenly pushed off it and turns around to see a fanged monster with wings on all fours, growling at him, clawing over traitor corpses to reach him. The worst monster Ran has ever seen, Askelion, the founder and lord of the Sanguinary Guard. We then bounce around to a couple of important scenes. One of them is Acte telling Dawn that she has felt Sanguinius' death. Dawn turns and walks off to find Horus after hearing the news. Acte tells him that he's gonna die if he confronts Horus. Dawn simply replies that he no longer has a place in this world. We get a scene where Foe has completed his bioweapon, what he's been working on since the start of the End of Death, and then we get into the main juicy bit. The Emperor and his companions make it to Horus's court. Sanguinius has been crucified, but the Emperor shows no emotion, just ordering that he be taken down. Horus approaches the Emperor and is surprised by the lack of reaction. The Emperor states, "You have killed my son," and begins asking why. Horus takes the opportunity to explain himself and demand the Emperor surrender, but the Emperor's response makes no sense. Horus thought he'd be intimidated by the Emperor, but now he sees just a small man in antique armor with 2 space marines and a custode by his side, not a towering god with legions at his command. Loken then steps forward and talks to Horus, who feels tears stream down his face and wants to hold Loken to his bosom and explain things will be alright. Horus thinks Loken has ruined this whole triumphant moment and then realizes the Emperor is talking past him to the 4 Chaos Gods watching from the shadows. Horus decides that enough is enough and attacks the Emperor. The Emperor healed the anathema when he healed Oll and John. They realize this and see the weapon has been made anew. They know now that he's given up the power of the Dark King. The Emperor needs every advantage and they get to Acte to teleport them to Horus as the Emperor's light is too dim to be found. Valdor is fighting through the Sons of Horus and Word Bearers to get to Abaddon. Abaddon has executed a purple encirclement, but Erebus tells him thinking like a soldier isn't enough. He claims he can feel Abaddon using the power of chaos like a rain and controlling it, and begs Abaddon to accept his power. Abaddon then agrees, calls off his forces and goes to fight Valdor, who scoffs when he sees a Just Chair in retreat and wonders why his space marines are so confused when he thinks they're worthless. Valdor lunges at Abaddon, who shocks Valdor by catching his spear in his hand. The spear bites into Abaddon, and this is where he sees 10,000 years of war flash in his mind, and he gasps, "Despoiler," before he's flung into the air by Erebus, and Abaddon slaughters Valdor's custody forces. We then jump over to Sigismund and his forces, trailed by Keeler and the millions of refugees who then attack the Death Guard. Sigismund kills a big Nurgle corrupted champion, but it has no effect in the immovable Death Guard ranks. Sigismund's forces begin to be bogged down and killed. This is when Keeler and her refugees begin chanting the Legio Divitatis and march at the Death Guard ranks. Keeler thinks it's time that the traitors give the people of Terra the respect that they deserve, and death is no longer feared by the refugees. The Death Guard open fire on the refugees, but as long as they draw closer, a strange power courses through the Death Guard and they begin to break and fall back as Sigismund's soldiers push forward. There is suddenly a charge which smashes into the Death Guard as a Death Guard retreat as the Dark Angels from the Hollow Mountain join Sigismund's forces. Aemon authorizes the use of Foe's weapon against all Astartes and Primarchs, but is stopped by another custodian who wants Vulcan's authorization first. Foe then runs off and tries to escape, but is caught by Aemon. Foe asks if he's going to be sentenced to another indefinitely delayed execution, but Aemon instead impales him with his custodian spear. Then we jump over to the throne room, and the throne itself is literally melting. Human ash swirls in the air, and Vulcan suspects the few remaining adepts who are working on the throne have had all their brains fried and are just repeating the same task over and over without actually accomplishing anything. Then the traitor Astartes begin attacking the doors of the throne room, and Vulcan decides to activate his talisman that will blow up Terra. Malcador is still being burned alive by the throne and tells Vulcan to stop, but because he's so weak, he cannot be heard by Vulcan or even sensed by Vulcan at this point. We then get brought back to the Horus and the Emperor doing their battle, and the Horus has hit the Emperor so hard, the Emperor collapses and cannot move. Horus then begins incinerating the Emperor with lightning, but the Emperor's 3 companions dive at Horus and attack him. When Horus turns his attention to the companions, the Emperor manages to get back up and shield them. Horus and the Emperor charge at each other, and each blow destroys a part of the court. The Chaos Gods, seeing this, squeal and clap happily. We then move over to Valdor and the remaining 4 custodians out of 50 who form up a circle as the sons of Horus and word bearers attack them. Valdor vowing that if any of them survive, they will head towards the storm. The storm is where Horus and the Emperor are fighting, that they can see in the distance. Then Dawn arrives to the fight with the custodians, and they are drawn by the scent of the blood angels, who lope in like wolves and swoop down like hawks on both sides because they're lost to the black rage at this point. Valdor and Dawn tear free and decide to run to the Emperor, abandoning the fight. Erebus tells Abaddon that his powers are failing and the gods can no longer hear him. We go back to Sigismund and the refugees, who are now allowed inside the Hollow Mountain. Sigismund forces are helping the Dark Angels garrison the walls as Typhon's forces attack again and again. The Death Guard are literally crawling up the mountain like spiders to reach them. Cypher initially tries turning Keeler and the refugees away, but Keeler has the choir master of the Astra Telepathica, and Cypher lets the refugees in to help the choir master in relighting the Astronomican. Keeler's refugees are afraid, but Keeler tells them to cast out fear and began leading them in a recitation of the Legio Divitatis. Cypher watches as sparks of light fly up the mountain. We go back to the Emperor fighting Horus, and Leto and Loken watch as the Emperor and Horus fight, but they see completely different things. Leto sees a complete physical battle in a decaying ship. He sees demons edging out of the darkness to eat Sanguinius and goes to guard the fallen angel's corpse. Loken sees himself next to a burning Malcador who can't speak and can't see the Emperor or Horus. He only gets brief flickers of cave paintings in the shadows, so he goes towards them. Now, during the Emperor and Horus's fight, this goes across all forms of planets and dimensions. One time, they're literally on Isfahan itself with a blow, they're on another planet with another blow, and then the duel turns into like a Pokemon / Magic the Gathering battle with a game of tarot where they're throwing cards at each other. But then Horus defeats the Emperor by playing the Despoiler and smashes the Emperor with Wordbreaker, causing the Emperor's deck to spill on the floor. Dawn carries a badly wounded Valdor through the Vengeful Spirit. Valdor, for some reason, isn't healing. Dawn reflects that his time in the desert has changed him. His thoughts are trapped on past mistakes or opportunities and obsessing over hate. He tells Valdor Sanguinius is dead. Valdor is silent before hesitantly admitting that he likes Sanguinius. He tells Dawn to let him kill Horus, as killing a brother would make Dawn feel guilty, but Dawn thinks Valdor is lying and actually wants vengeance for Sanguinius. Cyrene, under the orders from Rogel Dawn to find any remaining loyalists and direct them to the throne room, finds a small force of Imperial army huddling in a destroyed Blackstone prison. Blackstone is a dampener of the warp, but when broken and unraveled in its form, it does the complete opposite. Cyrene presses her hand to it and sends out a call through the warp for humanity to rise up and fight against the traitors. The Emperor must live, she shouts. Loken has been transported to the night of his induction to the Mournival and is surrounded by centaur versions of Abaddon, Axamund and Torgadon, ready to execute him. He can see Horus killing the Emperor over and over again in every dimension. Horus drags the Emperor's cold corpse to his throne, but can hear the demons around him whispering louder and louder until they wail in disapproval. The custodian who accompanied the Emperor sees the spirit of an endless hallway where the Emperor and Horus are fighting just out of his reach, but he can never move closer to help the Emperor. He sees the Emperor be dropped and dragged away, but hears the Emperor must live, and suddenly roars, the first time he has ever felt like uttering a war cry. Horus feels the Emperor's hand begin to warm up and sees a light forming around his hand. Horus then realizes the Emperor isn't using his own power. He's stealing it from Horus, like Horus stole from the gods, and the Emperor blasts Horus back. But the Emperor has only taken a little of the power, as he dared from Horus so it won't fully corrupt him. When the Emperor rises, he's been remade and he looks changed. All of his armor is sharper, angular, and his aspect is more warlike. He takes Worldbreaker from Horus and begins to beat him with it, but Horus then regenerates the lost power and wrestles it back. He punches the Emperor in the throat with his talon. The Emperor collapses again, and Horus then nails him to one of the 5 thrones in the room with a 5-pointed star, declaring that this is the fate of all tyrants. He then turns to survey the room as the 4 Chaos Gods whoop and chant his name, but when he turns back to the Emperor, the custodian who followed the Emperor is standing in front of the Emperor's corpse. He yells, "The Imperium defies you," but he's shaking, and Horus asks why. With what? Why are you shaking? The custodian begins speaking in the Emperor's voice and tells Horus that the 4 gods do not need him after he kills the Emperor, that they'll discard him. Horus shoots a beam from the eye of Horus on his chest and obliterates the custodian. Now, while the custodian is distracting Horus, Leto has snuck up to where the Emperor is nailed to the throne and begins pulling out those nails to free the Emperor. To Horus's shock, the custodian is still standing when the beam ends. He's burnt, his armor is all melted, but he still managed to utter a single line: "By his will alone." Horus shoots him again and kills him with the final power beam. He then turns to see what Leto's doing and picks him up. He says, "What even are you?" He then flings him across the deck and he hits into a pillar and collapses on the floor. Leto then looks up to see the 4 Chaos Gods above him. One turns to him. He is a bone at their feast table. Horus then crafts a crown of chaos to put on the Emperor's head, but when he turns to the Emperor has simply vanished. He then is stabbed from behind by the custodian spear. Horus smacks the Emperor back down and tells him death is too easy. He's going to make the Emperor submit and serve him. The Emperor grabs the crown Horus made and smashes it over Horus's head, splitting his skull. Vulcan has set in motion everything for the talisman to be activated that will wipe out everything on Terra and all the surrounding chaos forces, but a Sister of Silence tells him to listen, and then he hears Cyrene's voice and decides to wait a little longer. We then jump back to Oll and John, who are dumped out of the warp at Horus's feet. Horus looks down in confusion and feels sorry for them. They look up and John utters a single word of Annuncia, which knocks down Horus and sends him flying across the deck. They then both run to the Emperor. Oll convinces John to go back alone and shoves the dagger into the Emperor's hand. He begins begging the Emperor to get up. He pledges he'll never leave him again. He'll follow the Emperor's plan, serve him, keep him right. All he has to do is stand up. Then they hear a noise, but the Emperor is still. They turn and they see Horus coming towards them. All puts his lasgun on full auto while screaming for the Emperor to help. He gets no reply, and as Horus moves closer, All screams, "No further, I will not let you touch him," before Horus swings his talon and All becomes a cloud of red mist. Back to the Hollow Mountain, the Emperor Must Live chant invigorates Sigismund and calms the refugees as a Death Guard attack again and again. But Typhus rides up the battlement on a chariot surrounded by Death Guard priests who sing a song about Nurgle and crown Typhus. Cypher and the Dark Angels librarians charge out, outnumbered by the Death Guard psychers, but hopeful that they can stop their warp energies for a few seconds so the Astronomican will be lit and send the signal out for aid. Cypher and the librarians are successful for about 8 seconds until Typhus begins killing them, but it's enough to relight the Astronomican. Keeler and the refugees begin burning to ash as the light shoots into Terra's atmosphere, clearing away the endless night Terra has been bathed in. The Phalanx and its fleet drive towards Terra, and Gilliman's fleet picks up the signal. Horus thinks that the light will just let Gilliman see his father's corpse. He thinks Gilliman will swear fealty, but he thinks he'll have to kill the Lion, Russ and Corax, as they will never kneel. Loken returns to the throne room to see Horus trying once again to drag the Emperor to the throne. Loken tells Horus that Chaos is just making him a weapon and that he isn't in control. Horus throws Loken away and turns and smashes the Emperor's skull on the floor with Worldbreaker, but feels no joy in killing a helpless man. Horus begins to doubt himself as he looks at the crushed mess on the floor, feeling no closure at actually killing the Emperor. Instead, he can feel the whispers of the demons gnawing at his brain. He asks Loken to help him carry the Emperor, but then realizes he's as light as rags now. Loken then asks Horus to show the one thing the Emperor never did, a heart, and prove that he needs... Loken then asks Horus to show the one thing the Emperor never did, a heart, and prove that he should succeed as Horus, not a pawn of the gods. Horus considers this and decides that now the war is over, he doesn't want to stay a figure of terror. He pushes away the power and feels relief, but then the Emperor disintegrates. He turns and sees Loken still on the ground. The Loken he was speaking to sheds its skin and is the Emperor. The Emperor says he is not one form. He is the king of all ages. Mankind and the Emperor are the same. They begin swinging again. Horus bursts one of the Emperor's eyes, and the Emperor shoots a beam of light like the Astronomican directly at Horus. It's too much for Horus to bear, and he collapses, begging for Chaos to give him his power back. The Emperor tells him that he can still win. Chaos hates the Emperor too much to let Horus die here, but they'll return the power only after making Horus suffer to teach him a lesson to never reject their powers again. Horus instead looks up at the Emperor and tells him to kill him. He doesn't want to become Chaos's puppet again. The Emperor draws the anathema, but hesitates. Horus can feel the power rushing back suddenly, trying to stop what's happening. The Emperor says, "I will wait for you, and I forgive you," before thrusting the blade into Horus's heart. Loken can feel all the Emperor's will pouring in as he thrusts and cleaves it through Horus. Horus smiles, and his body falls down lifeless. The four begin to wail and scream in high-pitched voices, but with Horus gone, they have no anchor, and Chaos begins to fade. The warp is sucked out of Terra, the Blood Angels begin coming to, the traitors break, fighting still lasts for days, but the remaining defenders aren't numerous to stop the traitors from fleeing. The demons simply vanish, but it doesn't necessarily feel like a victory to the survivors. Dawn, Valdor and 3 custodians enter the throne room and find everyone but Loken dead. Loken says the Emperor just immediately collapsed after killing Horus, as his will was the only thing keeping him going. Dawn thinks the Emperor looks catastrophic and feels a pulse or a heartbeat, just the faintest death rattle of a wheeze. Valdor and the Custodes begin to cry as they look upon the Emperor, but do so in complete silence, which bothers Dawn more than hearing them sob. Valdor, however, says he can feel the Emperor is still alive. Some Blood Angels begin to enter the throne room, and Valdor yells at them that they are simply animals, but of course they have come back now from the Black Rage. Leto did manage to survive. Valdor and the Custodes lift the Emperor, Raldoron and the Blood Angels take Sanguinius, and Dawn then goes and gets Ferris's skull. They teleport away, but Loken refuses to leave, and he weeps over Horus's corpse when they're gone. Malcador's body has burned away, but his spirit still sees the Emperor be carried into the throne room and sat upon the golden throne. Abaddon and the Justarian enter Lupercal's court. Sometime later, Loken tells them about what happened, and in the end, Chaos refused to give Horus control of their power. Abaddon says he won't have any more of his brother's blood spilled and tells his followers to spare Loken. Loken says Abaddon should surrender and offers personally to go and represent the Legion in peace talks with Dawn. Abaddon refuses and says Loken can stay with them or go back to Terra. He won't stop him. Erebus then comes out of nowhere and stabs Loken in the back with the Anamatha and reveals Loken's death creates Samus. Then we have a few little tidbits towards the end. The archivist who is in the library with Cinderman is Lillian Chase, which I'll go into in another video because then that links to the Eisenhorn, Ravna and Beckwin series, which is a big one in the future. John Grammaticus is last seen tying up threads. They left, but it would take him an extremely long time. He's using a feather from Sanguinius to travel the galaxy. The book officially ends with Keela kneeling before the golden image of the Emperor, her hands raised in prayer. And that's it, brothers and sisters of the Imperium. What an absolute epic tale. It started with Horus Rising and it's ended with the End of the Death Part 3. I think we are going to get the Scouring. The rumours are at this moment, what I'm hearing is that they've already done a couple of books of the Scouring, so I won't be surprised if they're showing off maybe sometime this month since it's Black Library Month. But the story as a whole, it's been here for so many years now and we finally got to the end of it. I'm going to be doing some big videos going forward that directly come off this because, as I mentioned, there's some huge spoilers. The Emperor's Duel and what that really means with Horus and the Emperor and stuff like that. Cinderman and Lillian Chase and stuff going into everything with Ravena and Eisenhorn and Beckwin and stuff like that. There's so much stuff to talk about, right? It's circles within circles, as we keep saying. I'd love to get your thoughts on feedback and everything that we've discussed today. If you've got anything to say, post it down below and we can have a nice little chin wag down there as we always do. See ya, have a great day, and bye-bye.